Hey team, this is Grant David Collins, and welcome to Basement Philanthropy, a place for people who do not want to wait until they're rich or retired to create meaning, impact, and connection with their money, regardless of the amount. On this episode, we're going to be introducing a new series called Money Plus, so let's get started. If you've been alive at any point in the last 5 years, and I hope that you have, if you're listening to this podcast, you have seen a bunch of plus signs be added to a bunch of entertainment that you consume on a daily or weekly basis. Apple TV Plus, Paramount Plus, Disney Plus, there are plus signs everywhere. And so as I was thinking about what to call this new 3-part series that we are putting out called Money Plus, I realized that what they are trying to say as companies is, hey, here's more of what you have experienced from us. And so as I was looking at other ways that meaning, connection, and impact show up on top of micro-philanthropy, it just made sense to call the series this. In this series, we're going to be exploring your money and how when you add it to your talents, your time, and your voice, that amazing things can happen. We're going to start off this week by talking about your voice, because this is a podcast, for heaven's sakes. We can't not start out with talking about our voices. So I've got a question for you. What happens when you hear your own voice? If you haven't had that experience in a little bit, do me a favor and go record yourself on your phone and listen to it. If you're anything like the majority of the population, you will have an experience similar to your fingernails scratching down on a chalkboard. And that actually has some science behind it. You see, when we hear our own voices, we hear them in two different ways. The first way is like everybody else does. Your vocal cords produce sound that is heard by your eardrums and then processed by your brain. But when you are speaking, you're actually hearing a second way. And that second way happens when you start speaking. Some of those sound waves are transferred to your eardrum through your skull. And as these sound waves are working through your bone structure, they actually are being elongated a little bit, making them sound deeper than what they actually are. And so when you hear your own voice, it's a mixture of what everybody else hears and what is being created when those sound waves are going through bone. And so the reason why it sounds so different is actually because you are stripping away that second part. Oftentimes, people describe their voice as being higher than they expect, and there's good reasoning behind that. So what I find fascinating about this is the fact that your voice actually is what you are hearing in the recording. When we hear our own voice in the two ways that I'm talking about, it's actually a modified version of our own voices. And what kind of blows my mind even more is that we're only self-conscious about it when we hear it. Like, if you're a normal person, you're not walking around every day listening to your own voice and being like, oh man, I hate my own voice. Like, that just doesn't really happen. But so many people, when they hear their voice recorded, are like, oh man, like, my voice is horrendous. How is anybody listening to me? And we are all actually hearing what you're hearing in the recording all the time. And for me, it really has a connection to how people actually see their voices in the world. Like the same voice that is saying, oh man, that sounds so cringy, that's so weird, is also saying, yeah, I'm not a very good writer. I'm not a very good speaker. My voice doesn't matter. Martin Luther King was a good speaker. Abraham Lincoln, great speaker. I'm not in that boat. My voice is not going to change the minds of millions. So why even speak? Now, this line of thinking might sound familiar to you if you've been around this podcast for a while. It's the same line of thinking that happens when people start to think about using their money. Like if it's not the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, well, we might as well just not use our money because we're not going to change the entire world. The same exact line. And that siren song of my voice doesn't matter is just that. It's a fake song because your voice does matter. And I'm going to say that over and over and over again in this podcast because we don't hear it very often. Think about the last time that you really felt or heard that your voice matters. So many people around us, so many organizations try to keep voices down. And so today, for the 15 or so minutes that I have you, I'm gonna try everything I have to raise it up. About a year and a half ago, I went downtown Salt Lake to the Warby Parker glasses shop to buy a new pair of glasses. And what you wouldn't have noticed about me that day was that inside, I was actually feeling about as broken as the glasses that I'd come in to replace. I wouldn't have even been able to tell you that at the time, but looking back, like I just wasn't my normal self. And so I walk into the store and I start trying on glasses. All of a sudden, one of the workers comes up to me and says, "Hey, have you ever tried round glasses? I think they would look really good on you." And I hadn't. I had always associated round glasses with like my dad, and nothing against my dad. I just never really thought that I would be wearing round glasses because they weren't stylish, or I don't really know all the reasoning that goes into that. But I decided to try on some round pair of glasses and decided that, yeah, I did look good in round glasses. And so I ended up making a purchase. And if you have seen a picture of me or you're watching the video podcast, you'll see that I still have those round glasses on. What happened when that worker told me that I would look good in round glasses is something that's hard to communicate. But it instilled in me a confidence that wasn't there before. I'd lost this confidence in some of these interactions that I had had. And somebody looking outside of themselves and just like seeing me, it changed everything for me. It lit a fire. It was a spark that lit some dry tinder in my life. And I think about this person to this day. I couldn't even point them out to you in a crowd. I don't even remember what they look like, but their words had such a big impact on me. And they literally just said, "I think a round pair of glasses would look good on you." We've all had experiences like this. And what's interesting about our voices is that it's so easy to see how impactful they are in other people, especially when it comes to us. But it is so challenging. It's such a leap to see that our voices could have that same impact when they absolutely do. Like you have a conversation with a friend, changes the way that you think about your life, and you talk to them about that conversation a week later or a month later, and they don't even remember it. Or you are in line at a grocery store checking out, and the cashier says, "Hey, your hair looks great today." And it is the right thing to say to you at the right time, the rest of your day, the rest of your week, maybe the rest of your year is better. So we understand this, but for some reason, it is this gigantic reach for us to think that, yeah, my voice is the exact same way. So I want to walk you through an exercise that I've been doing to help me understand that my voice is there and that it matters. So this podcast is actually an exercise that I've been going through to start to discover my voice. And you can use the framework of a podcast to start to discover your voice yourself. Now, doesn't mean you have to go out and start your own podcast. If you want to, great, contact me. Love to help you get started. But it really is more just the framework around how this works. So what I want you to think about is I want you to think of a medium that you feel comfortable communicating in. Like if you're going to talk to somebody in a way that you choose, how does that show up? Does it show up in writing? Does it show up in a phone call or audio? Does it show up in video? Does it show up in forms of writing like poetry? Whatever it is, think about what you feel the most comfortable communicating in. And then, just like a podcast, I want you to set out a specific amount of time or amount of content that you're going to be producing on a weekly or a monthly basis. And I want you to be around creating content. You don't have to post this. You don't have to make it public. You can, and I think you should, but it can just be personal. So what you're going to do is you're going to follow that cadence. You're going to produce that content, and you're going to be looking for your voice as you walk through this exercise. So you can write about anything. Write about something that you really are interested in. Speak about something that you're really interested in. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're doing it on a consistent basis and that you are looking for your voice within that scenario. I think that the most useful way to approach this is by doing it 4 times over a month. But you can do it for however long or however short you want to. But what I believe you will have is the same experience that I've had on this podcast, which is a deeper understanding of my voice and the impact that it can have on those people around me. In science, there is a word called a catalyst. And what the definition of a catalyst is a substance that increases the rate of a chemical reaction without itself undergoing any permanent chemical change. And your voice can be a catalyst for your money and vice versa. Your money can be a catalyst for your voice. And so this is when we're going to be viewing those two things together. How can you use your voice to make what you're doing with your money even bigger and vice versa? The best way that I can illustrate this is just by giving you a bunch of different examples. So let's pretend that you have a local political candidate that you align with in terms of their views or their plans for the future. Like you could go out and you could donate to that person, and that would be really useful. Or you could go out and donate to that person and go out and canvas for them, use your voice to spread the message that you believe in. And think about how much more impact you would have if you said, yeah, I donated to this candidate and this is why I donated to this candidate. And if you believe in this future for our city, I would really appreciate if you would vote for this person. That changes perspective. Another example could be, let's say that you are really interested in creating a food drive. And instead of just using your money to go out and to buy cans of food for your local food pantry or food bank, what if you decided to get your community involved and use your voice by writing down what you're doing on a flyer, going and paying money to have that printed out, and then distributing that to your neighbors? Think about how much bigger that experience would be if you got more people involved by using your money and your voice to create this bigger impact. As I've been speaking, you've likely had ideas come to your mind. And the best way to understand this for yourself is to experience it for yourself. And so I would just invite you to go and do something about it this next week. Like, if you're listening to this podcast, you have some desire that is pushing you towards making and creating good. Go do it. And let me help. Let me help in that. Reach out to me. I would love to be a part of it. There is a common phrase that we use in our society to describe people who are not using their voices. And that is the silent majority. Now, this is a concept that is often used in politics, but it doesn't have to be, because it can describe any type of silence that is happening where people aren't speaking up that are in the majority. And about a year and a half ago, before I got involved with this whole basement philanthropy stuff, I was doing some discovery around my own voice and creating videos and different things to address things that I was seeing in the world. And one of those videos I came out with was a video that I entitled Dear Silent Majority. This was in reference to the political division that I was seeing in the country. But as I listened back to it, it has just as much to do with this conversation of our personal voices in whatever context they may find themselves, as it did during that time of big political heat.
Dear silent majority, I know you're not doing it on purpose, but your silence is pretty much impacting everything. Now, this might sound a little extreme, but real extremists are tearing us apart. The dream of community connection and open public discourse are turning into a nightmare of polarized stereotypes and all caps shouting. I can understand the hesitancy. Keyboard warriors run rampant, algorithms are creating addiction, and misrepresentation has become the new normal. And it's not just in politics either. It seems like every topic domain is in open season. It's taken me a long time to understand how valuable you really are. I shouldn't be surprised, though. Real heroes rarely receive the recognition they deserve. And while generations before you could let their actions speak louder than their words, today's actions are words. And your words are the fabric that hold our society together. Now, I'm not asking you to create a YouTube channel, podcast, or TikTok account. Although if you did, it would be pretty dope. I'm just asking for you to stop this famine of silence and to take your place as the majority, the noisy, friendly, moderate, and kind majority.
Your voice matters. Let me say that one more time. Your voice matters. It matters in the good that you are looking to create. It matters in the life that you are wanting to create. It matters. And if I could sit down with you, I'm imagining you on the other side of the camera that I'm speaking into right now. I would just want to be with you in a way that you could see that in the same way that I see that. It is a privilege for me to be a part of your life in some way with this podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeing yourself as somebody that matters, because you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you didn't. Well, team, that's it for me. Let's go out in the world and create good with the money in our pockets and the voices that each of us have together. Talk soon.